Yes, Monday night match, Thornton was back. Yukimoto yelling out Joey to trap. Dropping every time, sends money line. Don't leave me hanging with the unanswered fine. God damn, look at daddy, he dazzled with the deflection. Freddy looking over his shoulder like he needs witness protection. Matthew's sweating while the tissues thanks to his new daddy issues. Forget the fashion faux pas, I still hippie getting issues. All blasting plus, call him laser disc. Touch the risen from the slot, call them shots Netflix. Madison, tape to tape, VHS lock set. Stuck out 2 shades B-sides in our cassette deck. Deep snap, looking wider than an IMAX screen. Send staff on a budget made for TV. Chip out Deacon Morgan Riley, call that DVD. DJ vibing on the bench, burning big CDs. Faces in his team, but you can cure our disease. Call the doctor, call an ambulance, but it's not for me. We're the sickos, we're despicable, and that's why we scream. Yes, Yes, his face is in his team, but you can cure our disease. Call the doctor, call an ambulance, but it's not for me. We're the sickos, we're despicable, and that's why we scream. Yes, Yes, Leafs lose, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. Habs lose, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. Soup crew, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. Chili stew, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. Spartacat, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. Martin Havlat, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. Mark Mathot, let me hear ya, ha ha ha. If it ain't sicko talk, it's just blah blah blah. DJ, take your head and shake it. We can finish in the basement, dress the kids and keep them playing. That's all that's in Twitter saying. We just want more juice to go, skating pucks from coast to coast. If we wanna watch it dub, we'll subscribe to Crunchyroll. Well, let's just make one thing clear: winning must begin next year. Cause then we'll be standing here, sporting our sicko gear, living through your window panes, cackling through every game. Go Saints, go! Space is his team, but you can cure our disease. Call the doctor, call an ambulance, but it's not for me.
You're listening to the Hockey Podcast Network. New shows every day. Find us at thehockeypodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Sens Hour podcast. Oh my God, I got my podcast mixed up there a little bit. It is a pleasure to be back. It is our first episode since Derek has left due to personal reasons, but we'll be joined by head of scouting for the Dobber prospects and co-host of the Dobber Draftcast podcast, Tony Ferrari. I believe he's almost ready to go. We'll be talking about the Sens' upcoming draft class, as it seems like the draft will be scheduled for July, as it is expected. So Ottawa is expected for another bottom 5 finish. So we're going to have some prospects to talk about because we're not going to be able to see everyone. So just introducing Tony. How are you doing today? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I just, for whatever reason, StreamYard doesn't like using my webcam for some stupid reason.
Oh, that's unfortunate. But as long as we can hear you, that's a win for us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm not bad. How you doing?
Not bad. Thank you for joining us today. And obviously, we just got the information earlier from Elliot Friedman about how it doesn't sound like they're going to move the draft till next year. Were you surprised, or were you kind of expecting that as the case for the draft?
To be completely honest, I was expecting it. Like everyone I talked to on the scouting side of things, almost every scout was like, no, like this is a completely GM-driven initiative. The GMs want it moved because it's the GM's names on the line. It's the GM's kind of like it's their responsibility at the end of the day, but they're not the ones doing the work in reality. They're not the ones watching most of these prospects outside the top 2 rounds, maybe. They might see a guy here and there, but the scouts are the ones doing the work, and the scouts were not looking forward to trying to do 2 drafts at once, and I think that was the big issue.
Yeah, I think as a fan, having the 2 drafts within like a 4-day span would have been kind of cool to see, but I could expect from like a scouting perspective, especially for, you guys are elite prospects, how much more difficult that could be in the long run.
Yeah, it would have been awful, honestly, like especially for us, like us, some of the guys at Elite Prospects, some of the other websites, whether it be us here at Dobber Prospects or like FC Hockey or something like that, it would have been tough because we all have day jobs. We do this with long hours at night, early hours in the morning, kind of stuff like that, and it would definitely be tough on us alone. But even NHL scouts, like NHL scouting, like from every scout I've talked to, is a day and night job. It's something you're doing all the time, whether you're watching video or going to the games. So this is one of those things where, like, yeah, the GMs wanted to wait until they could get live viewings, but you can only get so many live viewings in a year. It's not like you're all of a sudden doubling the amount of games a scout can go to. So they're still going to have to heavily rely on video. They're still going to have to really pay attention to things. So it wasn't an ideal situation on any side of the scouting spectrum, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even for a casual fan, haven't been able to really dive into the prospects as much as you could previous years, which is why we want to have you on. We're going to jump into it. The number one, at least from what I've seen now, the number one consensus pick is Matthew Beniers out of Michigan. Ottawa fans have been kind of iffy on him about, is he as good as he actually looks, or was it just the ability to an 18-year-old who was like a month and a half, 2 months away from being a 2021 or 2020 draft pick, just kind of showing that he can stick around there, or is he really is he the real deal?
Well, I'd say he's the real deal. For me, he's one of the guys that's kind of separated themselves at the top. I have a group of 4 or 5 players up there. The scouting team had roughly the same group up there, so it wasn't too different on either of our boards. But it's kind of one of those things where I think Matthew Beniers is just the safe guy out of the big 3 that we've kind of identified as forwards. There's not many safe picks in this year's draft, and that's part of the issue. I wrote an article the other day where I looked at the value of a first-round pick, and just when you look at the numbers and you look at the production of the players in the top 10 this year, even on a rate basis, so not even just the fact that it's a pandemic, but even going back to their D-1s, this just isn't as good a class from top to bottom. You're really kind of losing out on value even in the top 10 this year, because you have guys who are going to be good NHLers, but you're more likely to get a middle 6 guy in the top 10 here than a top 6 guy for most of the picks here. All these guys have upside, but they've all got some pretty big holes in their game. And I think what's kind of separated Matthew Beniers is the fact that he doesn't really have any of those holes. He's a really good 200-foot player. His biggest issue is his skating is a little wonky at times, but it's not like he has an issue with mobility. It's just the skating stride. He likes to kind of really throw his whole body into it. You work on those things technically, and he should be completely fine in that regard. Even if he wasn't to fix his skating, there's uglier skaters currently in the NHL. So it's not one of those things that is a real major worry. So I think the safety in his game, the maturity, the fact that you kind of look at him and you go, all right, that's safely a number 3 center, but confidently I can say that's going to be a good number 2 center. I don't think there really is a number 1 center. I don't think there's a number 1 defenseman even in this draft. So it's going to be an interesting draft in terms of what teams value, because there are certain players in this top 10 kind of range where if you really want to take a swing and go for the guy that has a first line upside, you could, but there's some risk with it.
So you mentioned how there's no number 1, true number 1 defenseman. All we heard was about Owen Power kind of being the next best defenseman and how he had all the intangibles to be a sure top defenseman for any team. Has that changed then in the last couple of months since he's been playing with Michigan?
I think the big thing with Owen Power is the fact that he is that big 6'4", 215-pound defenseman that every team loves. And I think part of the reason that the hype has gotten so high is because, generally speaking, when people go for their prospect coverage or anything like that, they don't go to Dobber prospects. They don't go to even elite prospects for the coverage. They'll trust what a guy like Craig Button says or what TSN says and stuff like that. And nothing against Craig. Craig's a good friend of mine. I've had him on my show. So it's not like this is anything against Craig, but these networks are in the market of selling these kids. These networks are in the market of selling the draft so that when it does come around, we have something to talk about. And I think there's a belief that Owen Power has that upside. And I do think he does have that upside. Out of any of the defensemen, I think there's probably only 2 or 3 that really have that top pairing upside. And he's definitely one of them because he does have all those tools. But there's a lot of holes in his games in terms of decision-making. His defensive play is getting really overblown because he is that big defenseman. But he does have the outstanding puck rushing ability. You watch him get the puck in his own zone. He can bring it up ice with no problem. The issue becomes, what does he do with it when he's there? And that's going to get worked out as he kind of matures and whatnot. But you look at him and you look at a guy like Quinn Hughes in his draft year, or even Cale Makar in his draft year, and you look at them and you go, it's not quite the same level of prospect. You look at last year and you have a guy like Jamie Drysdale or Jake Sanderson, and even those 2 guys, I think, were maybe even a little step above the guys in this class. So it's going to be interesting to see where Owen Power goes, but I'm almost reserved to the fact that he's going to be that number 1 pick, because what GM's not going to look at a 6'4" defenseman that's already got a physically mature body. He's played a year in college where he was good in college. There's no doubt about that, but it's about the kind of the little details with his game that I think he needs to work out. And there's a lot of little details he needs to work out.
Well, guys, you heard it here first. I know a lot of people have been talking, at least for the Sens, drafting Owen Powers because they believe that he is like the best player, him and Luke Hughes on the left side. Ottawa kid, though, I believe he's playing in Denmark or Slovakia. Brant Clark. What can you tell us about him and what he brings to any kind of team that drafts him as a right-hand defenseman?
He's an interesting prospect because, yeah, like you said, he went over to Slovakia. He's played there for most of the year. I think he's been there since early January, late December. I think he actually played his first game. But he's an interesting player because he's really cerebral offensively. He's really smart with the puck, and he has the skill to do stuff with it. There's been an adjustment in Slovakia, and there's times where he's just airmailing passes by guys, and a lot of the time it's just not clicking over there. And you see the potential, you see the skills and everything, but I really want to see him come back over here because I had him on my podcast, Dobber's Draftcast, and I interviewed him and we talked a little bit about his adjustment over there. And he's like, part of the problem is he doesn't want to change his play style too much because he is kind of in his draft year. He wants to display what he can do. And over there, it's a lot more of a reserve game. Like one of the things he said was a lot of times in the defensive zone, I have the puck behind my net. There's 4 guys back to provide support. He's like, I don't need 4 guys back to provide support. I have the skating and mobility to kind of evade traffic and get that puck up ice with a nice pass into the neutral zone. He's like, I can hit a forward in stride, but these guys are so used to having to come back because there just really isn't any players in that league that have that really kind of elite offensive skill set. And there's work to do in Brant Clark's game defensively as well. And I think that's part of the issue with every player in this draft is there's work to do in one area kind of in a major way. And I think his defensive game has improved, but you're seeing the errors offensively. Like, despite the fact that he is adjusting to them playing and they're adjusting to him, you're seeing these passes get missed in the offensive or the neutral zone on breakouts and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, you can make that pass, but like, if there's not an open man, why are you trying to? And it's kind of gotten to that point with him. So he's an interesting player. I think he's definitely going to be one of the top 10 picks for sure, but he's a guy that I think is going to be kind of all over on boards. Like, I wouldn't be shocked to see someone kind of put him at number 1 because he does have some really interesting intangibles and tools, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him kind of drop to the back end of that and be at 7, 8, 9.
Wow. That's good insight. Something I didn't even, I wasn't able to find anything on. So that's really good information. And one of the other players, we'll probably go through player because Ottawa fans have these players tabbed as, okay, where can this person fit? And another one, my personal favorite, Dylan Guenther out of Edmonton, right-hand shot, can play the left side, big body. What do you see his advantages or disadvantages in his game?
Well, I really like Gunther's game. He's got an elite mind. He's really smart with the puck. He knows what to do with it. He gets to the good spots on the ice. With him, I think there's an issue with a bit of his pace of play. He likes to kind of let things come to him a little bit, kind of the way Cole Perfetti did last year. And we watched how good Cole Perfetti was. So it's one of those things that it's an issue until it's not kind of thing. It's one of those things where you look at a guy like John Tavares in the NHL. He doesn't play with much pace. Like, he's a bit of a slower end player. And I'm not even talking about the skating because Guenther's skating is kind of fine. It's not really an issue. It's just the pace at which he's processing the game and pace at which he's trying to push the pace of the game. So it's one of those things where I think he's a guy that likes to take his time. He likes to kind of cerebrally kind of pick out his spots, pick the defense apart, and do things that way rather than kind of the up tempo, up pace, high octane game that we're so used to seeing in the NHL today. He's a guy that, if like we're looking at the Senators right now, and you look at Tim Stützle and all the stuff he's doing, and there's holes in his game certainly, and I'm sure we'll talk about him maybe a little bit later, but he plays with so much pace, he plays with so much speed, he plays with so much fun. Like, this kid is just a blast to watch. And if you were to pair him with Guenther, I don't think that would mix very well because they just play completely separate speeds of the game. I think Guenther's a really good player, and I do worry about his pace of play. With the NHL getting faster and faster, I always tend to worry about these guys that have a little bit of a pace issue, but he's going to be a top 10 pick probably. If he keeps producing the way he is right now, he's got 10 points in 4 games. It's not going to be an issue production-wise for him because he's playing out in the WHL, and the Alberta division is not that strong outside of Edmonton, so he's going to be able to beat up on some not great teams and put up some numbers.
Yeah, I think that sounds like an NHL 21 be a pro kind of start to a season. Do you think he'd be kind of a good comparable? Like if Ottawa were to draft him, because I know, and most fans will admit that our winger depth is not the greatest. We have a lot of good centers, a lot of quality centers in the pipeline with Pinto and Norris and Co. Do you think he would be better paired with like a Kachuk on the opposite side?
Yeah, someone that doesn't necessarily need to play at 100 miles an hour. I think that's kind of the issue with Tim Stützle is that he likes to play the game at 100 miles an hour, and that's a great way to play. I'm not like that's when I say it's an issue, it's not an issue. It's just that would be the issue chemistry wise. I think with those two players, Brady Tkachuk likes to play that kind of meat and potatoes, grinded out game. He likes to kind of let things develop, kind of get to the net, put himself in a great scoring position, and just throw 45 shots from the friggin' home plate area. Like that's what Brady Tkachuk does, right? So Genther would be an excellent player to kind of be able to play a little bit outside on him, kind of get those pucks into the middle where he's going to be. And I think that could be a really good match, those two.
Yeah, I think like personally, I like him. He's my favorite draft eligible player. I got a question here from Derek, and he's asking what or which, if any, 21 draft eligible players could jump into the NHL as of next season.
Owen Power's going to. I don't think he should, but he's going to. Just because he's got that massive frame. Outside of him, maybe William Eklund. He's the Swedish winger, center winger that plays for Djurgården in the SHL. He's been really, really good this year. He's playing on a line with Alexander Holtz. He could probably jump into the pro game, but I think he'd be having a lot of the same issues that we're seeing some of the rookies this year having, where, yeah, he maybe puts up some points, but there's some flaws outside of that, and there's some issues defensively and stuff like that. So I think even he could probably benefit from a year outside of the NHL still. It's honestly, I look at this draft and maybe Matthew Beniers would be the one guy I feel safe going into the NHL with next year, just because he does play such a complete and well-rounded game. Because you can put Owen Power into the NHL, but I'd worry about rushing him and ending up with Tyler Myers, who's an NHL quality defenseman, but he's not the guy you want to draft first or second overall.
Yeah, that's fair. I think after his rookie year in Buffalo, where he ended up winning the Calder, he kind of started to dip off in Buffalo, but Buffalo as a whole started to dip off. So
yeah.
And honestly, before we talk about more prospects, I want to get your opinion on the Calder race. A lot has been made of the top four and how Stützle is the youngest one at 19. The other ones are 23, 24, 25. With Kaprizov kind of leading the way. What's your take on the whole, playing, however long in the KHL versus NHL debate?
I think the age limit that they have is probably a little bit too high. I think 23 or 24 should probably be the age limit. Because right now it's 27 or 28. Like it's pretty high. And
I think it's a 25 season. You have to be at least 25. Like your age 25 season. So like 26.
So I think it could probably come down a couple years. If I'm not mistaken, that would take out Lankinen and maybe Kakkonen, but no, I don't know. I think Kakkonen would slip in just under that. Same with Kaprizov. For me, I look at the debate for me right now is really kind of between Kaprizov and Kevin Lankinen. I think Tim Stützle is right up there as well. He'd be the third guy on my list probably. I think just what Kaprizov is doing overall, like he's affecting the game in so many ways outside of the score sheet, even that's where I give him the edge. I think Lankinen gets maybe even the edge on him just because what he's doing with that brutal Chicago team, it's impressive. Like he's having a good time. He's having some good games, and yeah, I'll be honest, he's carrying my fantasy team, which is helping me a lot, and so I appreciate that. But I think Tim Stützle would be right in there because he does have the production. He is so much younger, so I do think you have to take that into account here. Stützle has flaws in his game, like every 18 or 19-year-old in the NHL does, though. And for me, I look at so many other things outside of the score sheet. I'm a big data-driven guy, and even for prospects, I'm the same kind of way. And Tim Stützle was my favorite player in the draft last year, like bar none. Like he was just fun to watch. I loved watching him. For me, I probably lean with Kaprizov just because he is doing so much in every area.
Yeah, I think Kaprizov. Like I've had the debate with multiple people under the rules, the way they're written. Kaprizov is the Calder winner. Like there's no argument to that. I think he has played above and beyond what people were even expecting from him. At least anyone who hasn't been able to really follow him in Europe or in the KHL and isn't a Wild fan. But it's definitely interesting to see how much this discussion has taken up the last couple of weeks, because it's not usually an issue. Like, we don't hear about it outside of when Panarin won it and now. So is it really that big of a problem, or is it just like a one-off situation?
For me, it's kind of one of those situations it's going to happen once in a while. It's not going to be one of these things that are kind of an issue all the time. But I wouldn't be opposed to them instituting something where they go, if you've played 2 pro seasons after 20, then you're exempt. You can't do it. That would end up making the age about 22 or 23, and that kind of makes it a little bit more fair. And I think you have to look at what league they're playing pro in as well, and that's where it kind of gets tricky. Like, I think you probably have to go, okay, if it's KHL or KHL, the Liga, or the SHL, you can only play 2 pro seasons after 20. And the reason I put in that after 20 asterisk is because there's so many of these guys that end up playing pro over in Europe at 17, 18. You end up eliminating them before they even get a chance to turn 20 there. So I think 2 seasons after 20, if you've played pro, that's probably a good enough rule to kind of cut off the head where we're fighting with this dragon every 4, 5, 6 years, it seems.
Yeah, that I think that's a fair way to put it. You know, you're telling players that, okay, you can play in Europe, but you won't be able to come over here and be considered a rookie. And well, we can avoid looking kind of amateurish when we have a 23-year-old going against a 19-year-old in terms of which one's the best rookie. And it's good to hear there's that's something I haven't heard from. That's a compromise, I think.
Yeah, because like I said, I don't think you should knock kids that like Anton Lundell. He's played, I think this is his 3rd pro season already, and he's just 19. He's the same age as Tim Stützle. Like, it's not one of those things where he's like just out over there dominating. Like, he's had to earn his stripes in the Liga. So if he were to come over to the NHL next year, unless you made the 2 seasons after 20 rule, then he becomes exempt. If you talk about just if you played pro, then you can't be eligible. So I think 2 seasons after 20, or you just put the age at 23. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. Like, to me, 23 is kind of when I stop considering guys prospects anyways. Kaprizov and maybe goalies are the exceptions there. And Kaprizov was an extenuating circumstance, obviously. But for the most part, like, I look at a guy, like if I'm looking through the Ottawa Senators prospect pool, and like when I was doing the Senators prospects for Dobber prospects on their page, and I look through the prospect pool, I see a guy that's 25 or something like that sitting on their prospect page. I'm like, this guy's not a prospect anymore. Like, he is what he is at this point. Like, you're not really getting a whole lot out of him. So I think if you were to set it about 23, I think that'd be fine as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Looking at another prospect this year, or another rookie this year, the first overall pick last year, Alexis Lafreniere. Are you kind of surprised with how quiet of a season he's had in New York, or was this something that we should have expected?
Not really. It's a rookie. He's 19. Same thing with Tim Stützle, right? Like, the thing with Tim Stützle and Lafreniere, and I keep seeing this debate all the time online. It's funny to me because at the end of the day, you look at the situations and you go, okay, this one has the advantage here, this one has the advantage there, so they're pretty even, in my opinion. And the thing with Lafreniere is he's doing everything right. He's all the analytics and all the people that love reading all the stats and stuff and going through the charts. Lafreniere is doing really well on all those in all those regards. So he's one of the New York's best players at generating expected goals and all that stuff like that. So it's an interesting thing because you look at Tim Stützle and it's almost the exact opposite. He ends up being really, really poor in terms of expected goals against, in terms of expected goals. But then he's got the talent, and he's just kind of putting in pucks that don't generally go in for a lot of players. So there's a buffer of Tim Stützle is just more talented than most players who are producing these results. Like, you look at the rest of the guys producing these results, and they're bums on most teams' 4th lines. But Stützle is clearly not that, and it's one of those situations where I think with both guys, you have to look at the analytics and you have to look at the raw data where it's like the goals, points, and all that stuff. And in Lafreniere's defense, he has come up recently and he's been scoring a lot more. But you look at them and you go, okay, like, this is why you need to watch the game and look at the numbers. Like, you can't make complete basis of off of either, because if you did, then you're not understanding the intricacies of where the analytics are coming from, or the intricacies of why Tim Stützle is still able to put up those big numbers, because both guys, I think, are having good seasons. I wouldn't classify either guy as having an exceptional rookie season, but I think both guys are having really good years.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing that a lot of fans aren't looking at. We're kind of in a divide right now, at least from what I've seen on Twitter, is, everyone relying heavily on the analytics, while everyone or other people are relying heavily on the eye test or the base stats of points and production, which seems to cause a lot of problems in fan bases and how prospects are viewed.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where, especially with my work over the last couple of years, when I've done deep dives on guys, I'm making sure that anytime I reference an analytic, I'm putting up a video that goes with it to show where this analytic is being generated. Why are the expected goals so high, or why are the expected goals against so low? Why is this player a complete black hole defensively? Like, what is he doing to produce these results? Because without kind of using the eye test, using video, using what you're seeing on the ice to match up with the analytic is garbage. And without kind of understanding why things are happening on the ice, the eye test is garbage. So in my opinion, I've always been you have to mesh the two. If you're relying on one more than the other, you end up looking like a fool in a lot of cases.
That's, I agree on that. I've always been an advocate of using both, and neither of them tell the full story, but together they do. Yep. And one thing I know Ottawa fans have been relatively hindering on is the expected goals against and the expected goals for per 60, where they look at some of these numbers and they're like, oh, this doesn't really match up. How bad or how impactful is the expected goals for and against based on how bad the goaltending has been for Ottawa this year?
Well, normally I'd say the expected goals against is the one big one I think that people look at with Stützle and they like to rip him for, and that's basically just how many goals are expected to go in when he's on the ice. And in the fact that it is so low is concerning. It would be for any player, regardless of position or standing in terms of being a rookie or a veteran. The thing with Stützle, though, is that it's a little bit weird because while you can blame a lot of Ottawa's problems on bad goaltending because they haven't had the greatest goaltending this year, I think we've all kind of seen that, and Matt Murray having his struggles and Joey Daccord becoming the savior. By the way, thanks for beating the Leafs the other day. It's one of these things where, like, relative to his teammates, he's still so much worse in that regard, and I think that's the concerning part. At the same time, though, you have to look at it and go, okay, well, if he's still able to produce these results while playing this quote-unquote bad, what's he going to do when he starts playing good? Because that's going to be a big uptick. He's going to, if he gets to those dangerous areas, if he's playing better defense and turning pucks over and getting the puck up ice more quickly, kind of mitigating that expected goals against effect, you're going to see more offense from him. You're going to see more production. You're going to see more translatable and sustainable production. The only reason I'm kind of worried about it myself is that it is so much different than the rest of his team. The rest of his team's bad, and he's very, very bad. And that's kind of a concern. Even when you look at his line mates comparison-wise, they're all kind of on the negative side of the chart, but he's very far to the left in terms of the negative. Like I said, I'm not worried about it. I look at him and I go, he's a 19-year-old in the NHL who just played German pro hockey where they don't back check. So it's not really a huge concern for me at the end of the day. I think he's a smart enough kid. He's a talented enough kid. He's going to get it. Like, I'm not worried about Tim Stützle at 19 or 20 when the Senators' biggest thing going for them this year is the Sen Sickos, which are friggin' awesome, by the way. But I'm more worried about Tim Stützle when he's 24 and he's kind of leading this team down a playoff run. I'm not worried about his defensive effort right now. It's going to improve. He's a talented enough guy. Like I said, there's a lot of people that kind of like to harp on him, and I've even gotten into like little debates and trying to explain this, but on Twitter you have limited characters. It's hard to give a nuanced take on something like expected goals when you have 280 characters to tell someone who already thinks you're angry at them or you hate Tim Stützle. And that's why I always try to preface it like, Tim Stützle is my favorite player from last year's draft. Like, I'm getting a black Ottawa Senators jersey with the umlauts. Like, that's my boy. Like, but there are flaws in his game, and there's flaws in every player's game, like whether it's Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, or anyone else. So it's just one of these things that I think is going to get worked out by the time he's actually needing to be productive at 23, 24.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, I agree. I think Ottawa fans can kind of relax a little in terms of his defensive woes, at least analytically and on the eye test a little bit, give him a little bit of grace period. I'm one of the ones that are like, if you go through Senzao, I've been very a little bit more anal or a little bit more nitpicky about defensive play from certain players. Norris and Stutzla, in that mix. But I think overall they're starting to play better. They're starting to learn the system, and we'll start to see them kind of improve over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that game. Like I just referenced the game in Toronto or against Toronto when Decord got his first win. If I'm not mistaken, Tim Stutzle's expected goal share was up over 70%. Like he had an outstanding game. And in fairness, like they just wallop Toronto. So anytime you wallop a team like that, it's going to happen. But like if Tim Stutzle can start producing results a little bit closer to that, like on a more consistent basis, and I'm not saying he needs to be up over 70%. That's completely unsustainable. The opposite way. I think he's going to be a guy that drives possession positively. Like you said, I don't think there's a whole lot to worry about.
Yeah. We're hitting the halfway mark, and a lot of people have been asking, what would your top 5 in Ottawa for, like, if you had to, wherever we finish 1 through 5, who would you pick in each of those situations? If you're picking 1st through 5, and why? Because Ottawa fans are very curious on why certain prospects are falling in people's eyes.
All right. So if I had to choose my top 5 right now for Ottawa, I'd probably stick with my initial top 3, which is Matthew Beniers, William Eklund, and Fabian Lucel. I think for me, those 3 have kind of separated themselves. My number 4 on my board is Jesper Wallstedt, the goaltender, but the reality is he's not going to go that high, despite the fact that I truly do think he's probably the most talented player in this entire draft class. But he's not going to go that high. So I think Luke Hughes moves into that spot there at number 4. And then I'm going to go a little bit off the board here, and I'm going to go with a guy, Simon Edvinsson. He's a really talented offensive defenseman. He's got kind of a lot of the same raw tool package that Owen Power has, but if you're not drafting 1st overall, you're probably not going to get Owen Power in reality. I think he's going to go 1st or 2nd. The more I talk to scouts and stuff, it's becoming a situation where the infatuation with Power's intangibles and his ability to be big every time he steps on the ice, right? We always hear coaches say that he's 6'4" every time he steps on the ice, and that's Owen Power. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see where exactly he falls. But for me, he's not in the top 5 for me. I'd probably go with Grant Clark or Simon Edvinsson at that 5th spot.
Interesting. I think, that's definitely not the 5 that I was expecting.
Yeah, especially the Fabian Lucel one. That one's a one that people don't really get on board with because he's the same size as William Eklund, but he's kind of got that Lucas Raymond effect where we watch Lucas Raymond play really well, drive really good results, kind of do what Lafreniere is doing in the NHL right now, where he's doing everything right. The numbers just aren't coming on the board, and he's doing that in the SHL right now as well. Fabian Lucel, he plays with an incredible amount of pace. I talked about that earlier with Dylan Genther. Well, this guy's the exact opposite. He's Zach Hyman on steroids. He's a guy that never stops moving. Like he just goes. But he also has an incredible level of skill and talent. He's got so much ability that it's really impressive. He's the guy in the top 3, I think, with Beniers and Eklund, where I look at and I go, if there's going to be a first-line player that comes out of this top 10, I think Fabian Lucel would be that guy because the upside is just so ridiculous with him. He's so smart, and he's just incredibly talented. Like I said earlier, I've for that top 3, I've gone Beniers is the safe guy, Lysel's the swing, and if you want to kind of balance the 2, then you're going to go with William Eklund.
Yeah, seems like a pretty good top 3. I think Lysel's definitely the dark horse that I think a lot of people weren't expecting to crack the top 5, and probably we're looking at it as like, okay, well, depending on if we were to fall out of the top 5 for whatever reason, that's probably the guy they were looking at. Can you tell us a little bit about Luke Hughes, the 3rd Luke Hughes brother, committed to Michigan? What does he bring like that maybe Quinn doesn't bring to the Canucks, or is he very much a similar mold?
I think the one thing he brings that Quinn doesn't have is the size. He's already above 6 feet. I think he's 6'2" now this year. He's a bit of a bigger player. Like Quinn Hughes out of his draft year, I think was 5'10", being generous. And now he's only 5'11". Like he hasn't grown a whole lot. So it's not like he's a big player by any means. Luke Hughes has that size. He has the skating ability. I think he has a lot of the skill where I think kind of lacks in comparison to Quinn and even Jack to an extent. I know it's hard to compare defensemen to forwards, but is the processing speed. I don't know if he's got the same kind of elite mind that those two guys have. I think Quinn Hughes just, you see him just pick apart defenses, kind of look at them and just basically assault wherever he sees the weakness, and he just attacks it. And while Luke Hughes has some of that in his game, I don't think it's to the same level. He's a very, very good defenseman. I do think he's one of the few guys that could be a top pairing guy. I don't know if he's a number one, but I think he could be a top pairing guy. And the skating, the skill, the offensive game, it's all there. Like I said, I don't think he has that. Maybe I'll call it the killer instinct that Quinn Hughes has, but he's got a lot of the same tools and he's got a bigger frame.
Yeah, I think that's actually good information. I think Luke Hughes is one of those guys where people will look at like, okay, you're probably gonna get the worst of the three. I think people, because of the expectations, it's like, in my opinion, I think it's the stall effect where you have Mark, Eric, and then Jordan came into the league, and Jordan has just kind of floated by. He doesn't get much attention, and no one really considers him as like, if you mention the name Stahl, it's always Mark and Eric. I think that might be the same effect with Luke coming out of Michigan.
Yeah, I don't think that's too dissimilar of a situation. Like I think Quinn's going to be the best brother of the three. I think Jack's going to be really, really good as a forward as well. I think he's going to be a guy that puts up big numbers. But I think Luke is going to be one of these guys that he's a top pairing, second pairing defenseman. He's going to be a top four guy. He does a lot of really good things, but he never really pops the way Quinn's popped at times.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another change within this draft is Seattle. I think they have the third. They're given the same odds as the third worst team.
Yep.
If Seattle were to pick first overall, they were to win the lottery, do you think it would be beneficial for them to try to trade it or use it?
This year I'd say trade it. I would. I'd trade down if I was Seattle. I'd be like, let's see what else I can pick up. If I can stay in the top five, kind of work some magic. Maybe Ottawa is willing to kind of give up one of the second rounders that they have, or kind of give up a few other things, or whatever it may be. Or maybe they work out a deal where they don't have to protect, or they help a team and they let a team protect an extra guy by swapping picks or something like that. But I think it's going to be interesting because Seattle's got so much like free space, right? Like that's the beauty of an expansion franchise is you can start from scratch. And in this draft, there isn't a Lafreniere, there isn't a Matthews, there isn't a McDavid. So you're not getting a guy that you're necessarily going to be able to build your franchise around, but you could get a guy in Matthew Beniers or William Eklund or even Owen Power, like that really kind of cements your status as like a guy that's going to be the heart and soul of your team. Could be a future captain, one of those guys. Like I said, there's no franchise-altering player in this draft, I don't think. I think most people would agree on that. And like I said, going through some numbers when I was kind of evaluating the first round picks, it's going to be a tough year for first round picks. I think you're getting top 15 quality in the top 5 or 10, and then you're getting top 50 quality in the first round. So it's not necessarily the strongest draft. So if you can kind of pick up all these little extra lottery tickets, that might be a good decision for them.
Or there you guys have it. Seattle's on the clock when it comes to what they can do because they do have all that free space. And continuing with the Seattle thing, and it's not draft related, but it kind of is. It's expansion draft. There's a bunch of talk in Ottawa. Exposing Murray is probably a foregone conclusion right now in terms of protecting the court over him. But the big one right now is Evgeny Dadonov. He hasn't produced the way I think the team and himself has expected. Doesn't have a no move or a no trade. Do you think Ottawa could expose him if it meant protecting one of their young players that they don't want to give up to Seattle for nothing?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think Dadonov was a guy that they brought in to kind of just be someone that is competent on this team right now because they knew they were going to be bringing a lot of rookies. They knew they're going to be young. They knew they're going to be growing. There's going to be growing pains. Like you said, Dadonov, he's a good player. He's not produced even to what I've expected of him in Ottawa right now. So maybe he is a guy that they expose and when they send out to Seattle, or maybe he's a guy they use in a deal to just protect someone extra. Maybe they want to keep both Murray and Decord, and they say, hey, take Dadonov and we're going to work out some other deal with you as well. Like there's ways to work around things. And I think Dodonov could be a package or could be part of a deal for Ottawa to maybe protect a little bit extra than what they expected. But their entire expansion process is still probably pretty up in the air, especially with the goalies kind of not knowing what they're going to do right now.
Yeah, I think the goaltending. I think from a fan's perspective, it's Murray's gone or Murray's unprotected. The court's protected. If you lose Gus or Hogberg, you'll lose one of them. It's not the end of the world. But overall, the expansion draft is going to be fun to watch. Are you expecting a Vegas 2.0 with Seattle, or should we expect kind of Vegas or Seattle to be a regular expansion team where it has its struggles and it's probably in the bottom 5 or bottom 10 at the end of the 21-22 season?
I'm really interested to see how other NHL teams are going to react. Are they going to try to repeat the same mistakes that they made? And that's kind of the way I lean, because NHL teams, we've seen it many a times, they're not always as smart as they should be. And it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, teams are going to see what Florida did. Teams are going to see what Pittsburgh did. And they gave them Fleury and a second-round pick to protect Matt Murray. Like, Florida gave away Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith so that they didn't take a defenseman that's no longer in the NHL now. So it's one of these things where I'm like, man, if I'm a team, I don't look to do too many deals with Seattle, because I don't want them to be Vegas 2.0. But at the same time, you're going to have a team that's going to be like, oh, we really got to protect this third line left winger because he's a stud. He's a guy that we need to protect, and they're going to pay out the nose to do it. And Seattle's either going to get an extra first-round pick, or they're going to get a promising prospect, or they're going to get their version of Riley Marchessault and build half of their first line or 2/3 of their first line with one deal that they basically weren't going to have to make anyways.
Yeah, I think any team that got screwed out of the Vegas expansion, it was definitely Florida with Smith and Marchessault. For what was it? Petrovic is who they wanted to protect?
Yeah, I think it was Alex Petrovic, and maybe he is in the NHL, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, why are you protecting him over like two guys that have produced numbers for you? Like, it was a silly move to me.
Yeah, and then Vegas ended up with 3 first-round picks, and 2 of them are now in the North Division.
Yep.
Crazy how things go in like 4 years.
Oh, when you want to get Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone, it's you're willing to pay Nick Suzuki and Eric Brandstrom.
That's true. Do you think that Vegas's window is probably only like 2 or 3 more years before we start seeing them struggle and decline with the contracts that they have?
I think it's probably a couple more years than that, but I definitely think they're in that Washington situation. Like, they're in that situation where, like, if you don't win in the next couple of years, maybe 3 years, like, you're gonna have some issues because Alex Pietrangelo is getting older. You got him forever. Mark Stone I love Mark Stone. He's my favorite player in the entire NHL. Like, I have an Ottawa jersey, I have a Vegas jersey. Like, he's awesome. But he's getting older too. Like, Max Pacioretty, same thing. You look on that blue line, and they don't have a ton of young pieces necessarily. They're not a typical expansion franchise where you're like, oh, look at how good Marian Gaborik is, our new young stud. Like, they don't have that guy really. So like, Cody Glass is good, but he's not that. So it's one of those situations where you look back and you're like, man, like, if they still had Nick Suzuki, like, maybe that's the guy that could help bridge the gap between the old and the new, but they don't really have that guy. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they go out, because so far, since they've been a franchise, they've just been a model of consistency.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know a lot of fans are hoping that Seattle isn't a Vegas 2.0 because they don't want to see an expansion draft make the Cup final in their first year.
I just want a Seattle-Vegas conference final. Year 1 of Seattle. Let's go. Let's have some fun. I don't like any team.
Continue.
Ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, like, what did you think of Seattle's like jerseys and their colorway and the entire look of the Kraken?
Man, I love it. I loved it. Coming out with something a little bit different. It's a little fun. Like, it's just like their logo is not great. It's a good logo, but it's not like a legendary logo. But I think the jerseys, like, that's what made it. Like, that one little touch of red, like, that was just a perfect little touch. And there are so many different things, and maybe it was part of the reveal. They made it a big pomp and circumstance as well. But man, like, they're doing it right so far. They're not a team in the league yet, and they're already one of my favorites to listen to and to hear what's coming next.
Yeah, I think there's also Buffalo fans that are starting to jump ship
Yeah, that
to
makes
cheer
sense.
for Seattle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd jump ship if I was a Buffalo fan right now too.
Here, I know it's not Ottawa because we're no longer the laughing stock. I think when people look at teams, they're like, okay, Ottawa has something going for them. Buffalo, on the other hand, is in a complete different situation. If you were the GM, would you trade Jack Eichel to the Rangers or any team willing to overpay for him?
If I'm the Buffalo GM right now, first I got everyone in the front offices. I fire every scout and hire new ones. I'll just go to Twitter, hire these people. They're probably better. And then I go, you know what, Jack? Like, this is going to be 3 years before I can get this thing somewhat good. Do you want to be here or not? Because if you don't, I'm going to move you right now, and I'm going to get a boatload for you. I'd be honest with him. I'd just be like, dude, like, you make the decision because this is your career just as much as mine, and keep that report. Like, because if you do that for Jack, he's going to go around, especially if you're a new GM, he's going to go to other teams and be like, oh yeah, man, like Tony was awesome. Like, he was really good with me. He got me out of the town when I wanted to, and he got me to a winning situation. And that reputation of being a guy that helps out his players is going to go a long way, I think. And in Buffalo, I think you need stuff like that to change the culture. I think you need a complete overhaul. You need to get rid of anybody that's ever touched foot in that arena right now. I still think Jack Eichel, Rasmus Dahlin's having a terrible year, but I still think he's really good. They have some good pieces. I'd be asking if they want to be here for 3 more years, because if I'm a new GM coming in there, it's going to be a few years before they're competitive. And if they don't want to be there, then yeah, I'm selling the farm and starting new. I'm treating it like an expansion franchise, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's probably the cleanest way of putting it, is just cutting it at the roots and rebuilding from the ground up.
Yeah.
I know Ottawa fans have thrown out, Logan Brown for Casey Middlestat because neither of them seem to be working in their respective organizations. But you have to feel bad for Buffalo fans at this point, right? I think they've missed the playoffs like 10 years now, or going on 11. They got Jack Eichel, they have Rasmus Dahlin, and they just can't seem to figure it out.
Yeah, I feel bad for Buffalo fans because every year you look at the NBC ratings and you look at the Hockey Night in America ratings, and Buffalo's always up there. They're always number 1 or 2. It's them in Pittsburgh usually. And most of the time, they're not playing on those nights. They're not playing in the Hockey Night in America game. They're not playing on the national game on Wednesday nights, on rivalry night, or whatever they're doing over there. Like, it's interesting because that fan base, that city, is so passionate about hockey, and they've just been left to basically be a dumpster fire since Chris Drury left and since Scott Gomez left, and or not since Scott Gomez, but Daniel Briere, sorry. Like, since that kind of era, they've basically been a dumpster fire.
Yeah, which is not what you like when you look at Buffalo. I mean, they've had their bad years like any other franchise, but at least when I was growing up, Buffalo was always like, this was going to be a tough game no matter what. Like, if you did not bring your A game, they could just shove it down your throat. And now you look at Buffalo and you're like, okay, well, we have to bring our A game, obviously, but there's not as much pressure or expectations of like this being a very tough defensive game. I think there was a clip against Washington where they just allowed one of the Washington players to just dance around them.
Yeah, that was Backstrom walked around with Dahlin. I forget who the second defenseman was, and then Eric Stahl, and like none of them even tried. It was pretty embarrassing. And like you said, I think it's one of those situations where you just got to cut it out at the root. Like, that's a bad spot right now. And like you said, like, teams are looking at Buffalo and they're going, man, like, that's a night where we can basically coast. We can go at 80% that night and probably still come out with a win.
Yeah, I'll admit, I had Buffalo being a playoff team. I looked at their roster. I thought bringing in Taylor Hall and especially Eric Stahl to kind of play with, Jeff Skinner on a line with either Reinhardt or Olofsson, that top 6 should have been deadly. They could have got like decent depth scoring out of their bottom 6. So I was expecting big things from Buffalo this year, and it just hasn't materialized.
Yeah, it's depressing because every year you kind of have that hope for Buffalo, and every year Jack Eichel, 15 games in, wants out, and like you can just tell he wants out on his face. He's not good at hiding it, and I love that in a player. Like I love seeing a guy get emotional, get hyped up. Like that's why I love the Kachuk brothers. Like I'm not a Senators fan, I'm not a Calgary fan, but those are two of my favorite guys because of the how much heart they play with, and Jack Eichel plays with his heart on his sleeve, and there's so many games where you end up seeing him just looking dejected on the bench.
What is your team? Like, who is your favorite team?
Oh, on a Senators podcast, I probably shouldn't say that I'm a Leafs fan, but I am a Leafs fan. But I'm also the most self-deprecating Leafs fan in the world. I've been saying it to the guys on Sen Central all season long that it's going to be fun when the Senators squeak into the playoffs and then beat the Leafs in the first round. It's going to be great. Like I'm just prepared for it. Like I'm a Leafs fan, but I won't be cured from the past until I actually see them do it because I just don't believe it's going to happen.
Hey, I mean, at least you're honest about it. At least you're not one of those fans. I mean, this goes out to any fan who believes their team is like all almighty and there's no issues and everyone else is wrong kind of thing.
Oh no, like I see Leafs fans on Twitter. I see Senators fans on Twitter. Like I see fans from every fan base have this. The Leafs fans, there's so many of them. Toronto's such a big city that they just seem to dominate the conversation sometimes because for every 5 Senators fans, there's 15 Leafs fans. So it's one of these things where you see so many Leafs fans getting super hyper aggressive or thinking their opinion's right or this, that, or the other thing. And you're like, guys, like, let's be honest. This is hockey. As much analysis as we do, this is the most random sport in the world. Like the Leafs lost 3 series in a row to Boston in Game 7. Like that's not something that happens in normal sports. Like hockey is ridiculous. So I'm not ever expecting the Leafs to win the cup because you shouldn't expect any team to win the cup really. Like even Tampa Bay, like they lost to Columbus in the first round a couple of years ago after setting the wins record in the regular season. Hockey is a game of bounces with a small rubber disc on ice with guys on knives. So it's a ridiculous sport and at the heart of it. And I don't think you can ever get too hard on yourself when your team ends up losing in the first round, or you just need to be realistic about it. No team's perfect. Every team has flaws.
Agreed. What's your take on what's going on with Frederik Andersen? I know he's a free agent. He's basically playing himself out of Toronto, right? It has to be.
Yeah, I even going into the season, I was like, unless he's taken a good deal, like unless he's basically signing for what he's already being paid right now, you're probably not re-signing him anyways. It sucks. I'm a big Freddie fan. I like Freddie. He was really good for his first couple years in Toronto. Last year he wasn't, especially in the second half and then into the play-in rounds and stuff. He was good against Columbus. I'll give him that. But then he lets in that bad goal. He lets in this bad goal. And he may only let in 2 goals in a game, but they're both goals that you look at and you go, God damn it, Freddie, I really wish you had that one. And we're seeing that too much this year. And we're seeing Leafs fans go, oh, I want Jack Campbell as our starter. And I'm like, if Jack Campbell's your starter, okay, man, like that's not great. That's it. He's a good goalie, but he's a good backup. Like there's a reason he's a good backup. And like he's the nicest guy in the world. Like I don't know if you've ever seen him on Instagram, but he's like commenting all the nicest things on his teammates' posts. Whether it's like, oh man, you look good in those shorts, or like, oh sweet new haircut, man. Like he's literally the nicest human being ever. When he got his shutout last week, he credited Jason Spezza for scoring a nice goal. Like he's super nice, but he's a backup goalie. If he's the guy that you're banking on to lead your way in the playoffs, I really hope you hit a PDO bender, and I hope your team can outscore the coverage because it's going to be tough.
I mean, hey, you can do a Khudobin and just kind of lead the way like you did with Dallas last year.
Oh, man. If Jack Campbell does that, I will buy a Jack Campbell jersey with the Stanley Cup emblem on it. It'll be the best. I'll be the happiest pig in shit to be wrong. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I hate the Leafs, long life Sens fan and whatnot, I think it'd be there's some players on there, Marner, Spezza, even Riley, where I look at it, I'm like, if you're gonna have success, I'm not gonna be totally upset about it. Just kind of wish it wasn't with the Leafs.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm the same way. Like I look at the Senators right now, and I watch way too many Senators games for being a Leafs fan. And it's not even just the games against the Leafs. It's because I like watching Tim Stützle. I like watching Brady Tkachuk. I like watching some of the young guys. Like it's the same thing out in Calgary. Like I watch them for some of the guys there, and like it's one of these things where like I think there isn't a team in the league outside of Montreal that I look at and I go, man, I really don't want them to win. Like, I want the Senators to win. I want the Canucks to win. I want, okay, maybe not Boston either. Screw Boston, but like outside of Boston and maybe Montreal, just because it's Montreal, like I would love to see most of these teams win a cup. And if Toronto gets a turn in there, I'll be ecstatic. But like I said earlier, like this sport's played on ice with guys on blades and rubber pucks, so it's not anything you can ever really expect.
Yeah. How disappointed were you seeing Hutchinson and Anderson rocking the St. Pat's jerseys with their white and blue gear?
It was the stupidest thing ever. I hate. Okay, I'm just gonna go on. Like, this might endear me to Sens fans even more than I already have been for some reason. You guys seem to love me, but I hate the St. Pat's jerseys. They're god awful. Stop wearing them. You don't win in them. They're not good. They're ugly jerseys as well. I don't get it. And of course, like, the goalies come out with the blue pads, and I'm like, it looks even stupider now. Like, this is ridiculous. You deserve to lose.
Hey, at least they ditched the beige pants.
Honestly, at least the beige pants were like, oh, we're doing something stupid. Like, now it just looks stupid. I don't get it.
I was out at Tanger in Canada, and I saw someone wearing a Matthew St. Pat's jersey, and I was just like, the numbering on the back, it just looks so bad. It makes the jersey look fake.
Yeah, like, it really does. Like, I've never been a fan of the St. Pat's jersey. I'd rather them just go with like their Winter Classic jersey or something, or give me something that's not that green ugly mess.
What about the reverse retro? If you had to pick for them to wear one jersey for the rest of the year, St. Pat's or reverse retro?
Oh, reverse retro. That Pat's jersey is just disgusting. It's vomit on a sweater.
Fair. I kind of want Toronto to bring back the Arenas jersey. Not gonna lie, I think that would have been kind of cool.
That was way better. Yeah, when they wore that a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and it was way better than both of the jerseys they've got as alternates this year.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they didn't, like, their reverse retro wasn't either a St. Pat's one, do like a green and white, or a arena one and do a white and blue, because I think the only arena ones I've seen have been blue and white.
Yeah, I think the arena one would have been way better. I like the leaf on this jersey. I do. I just don't like the way that they've done it. Like, I feel like all the elements of the jersey are fine. Like, the leaf is fine. The shoulder stripe is fine. The numbering on the back is fine. But putting them all together it just kind of looks goofy. It looks like they tried throwing 3 jerseys into one.
I also think the gray is kind of what throws people. Like,
yeah,
the gray is kind of what does. Like, for me, it's the same with Winnipeg. The gray there's no reason for the gray to be the primary color on a jersey, or even for Toronto, a secondary color.
Yeah, it looks kind of goofy, especially, like, I don't know if you've seen this on Twitter, but after the first time the Leafs wore the reverse retro jerseys, they had to fix the numbers and essentially make the border on the gray border on all the numbers thicker, because you couldn't read the numbers on the broadcast. And I guess every broadcaster was complaining about it.
Wow. I did not hear about that. That was not something I was aware of.
Yeah, it was goofy thing that the Leafs do all the time.
Hey, at least it's only for like a 56-game season, and they're only wearing it, probably like 3 more times the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think they've got 2 more, maybe 1. I don't think it's very much. They got it out of the way early.
Yeah, and I mean, at least you're not Detroit. Like, I think we can
the
all
practice
agree.
jersey?
Yeah, I think Detroit is probably the worst. I think we can all agree on that.
And the worst part about it, too, is they didn't even commit to it the rest of their uniform. The rest of their uniform is the exact same uniform they wear at home. They have the red pants, the red jerseys, the red helmet, and a white practice jersey. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, and they had so much potential, too. Like, this Detroit had jerseys that they've only released in one colorway as a home jersey or as an away jersey. They could have literally just been like, okay, we're going to reverse retro this one.
Yeah, they could have gone back to the Detroit Cougars. Like, they had some awesome jerseys back in the day. Like, they decided to go to the practice jersey. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also disappointed with Minnesota's.
Oh, really? I love Minnesota's. I will say this. I wish Minnesota's colorway was flipped. I wish they went with the dark jersey, but those colors. I think that would have been sharper.
I just don't like the logo. I think
That's
had
fair.
Like in the late 2000s, early 10s, they had like that forest green with the stylized word mark, like
Yeah.
Minnesota. If they took the M from that word mark and put it on that jersey in that colorway, I would have no issue with it. I just think it looks weird with the current logo on it.
Yeah, I will agree with you there. I do wish they did change the logo because it's cool. I don't know. That logo's never really done it for me, to be completely honest, but I do like the colorway that they got now.
Yeah, I have no issue with the colorway. It's just that logo. It's just it's so out of place.
Yeah.
Where, like, I think they tried doing what LA did with the black and silver logo, but with the yellow and gold and purple colorway, and it just did not work.
Yeah.
But, Tony, we're going to wrap up because it's an hour and we try staying around an hour to keep people interested. But thank you for coming on and talking Jersey, Sens prospects, and much more today. And hopefully we can have you on whenever, if they announce the draft is supposed to be in July as they're expecting. Maybe we have you on before then to give a little bit of a draft primer.
Yeah, definitely come on again and talk about more prospects and maybe get into a little bit deeper than the 4 or 5 we got to today.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to kind of look in when we kind of know more of what's going on with the draft.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure having you, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, guys. And that is Tony Ferrari out of the Dobber Prospects and the host or co-host of the Dobber Draftcast. Thank you all for tuning in. It was a pleasure. Definitely weird being back doing this solo again after having Derek for most of season 2. So appreciate you tuning in. Thank you all for listening. You can catch me, Shane, SR Podcaster 97 on Twitter, Sens_hour on Twitter and Instagram. New episodes on Thursday and Monday. Remember, DraftKings THPN, DraftKings Daily Fantasy, best place for daily fantasy. Select 6 skaters under the salary cap. Win points, get points, win money. Fantastic. Download the app. And remember, Customized Sports. Head on over to customizedsports.com. Use promo code THPN for 10% off your order. They have everything from the original Sens jerseys to now. Fantastic quality. If you want to know what they look like, send me a message on Twitter. I will gladly send you pictures of the stuff that I have from them. And remember, guys, thank you all. Hockey Podcast Network at HockeyPodNet. Fantastic place for all your hockey news. We'll catch you back here with a brand new episode this weekend. Stay safe. Go Sens, go. And again, they play Wednesday nights. And if you're listening to this on Thursday, they play Wednesday night. Anyways, have a good one, guys. See ya.
Sick as pain, sick as team, but you can cure our disease. Call the doctor, call an